All right. A very warm welcome and good morning to this experiment. It feels different than a normal conference at MERICS, but we certainly appreciate that we can be doing this together with you. We have a very hybrid setting here. We have colleagues in different rooms at MERICS. We have guests here in this conference hall. We have colleagues looking at the live stream, and we have participants who are joining through Zoom video conferencing. So we hope that we can hold this fleet together and obviously look forward to some disruptions also in between, but we hope that we can all stay together on this path forward. Charting a new course for European China policy, resilient, competitive and geopolitical. Welcome on board for this journey. We think that this is a watershed moment for EU-China relations. And it starts with the leaders meeting just this Monday, where we've seen Chancellor Merkel, Ursula von der Leyen, Charles Michel meeting their counterpart Xi Jinping in a very high profile effort to chart a path forward for Europe-China relations towards the end of this year under the German Council presidency. We also know that there's a special European Council summit upcoming in about 10 days, where China is high on the agenda. And obviously, again, we expect that some decisions will be taken on what European China policy should be going forward. Coming month, we will hear about the prospects or the eventual conclusion, possibly, of a comprehensive agreement on investment. And obviously, this will also change the course of Europe-China relations, if that happens, the way that it potentially happens, or if it doesn't happen. Now, with that, I think I've already forgotten to say a few things. So first of all, I hope that works. My name is Mikko Huotari. I'm the Executive Director of MERICS. A very warm welcome once more. But also, I think we should say that it's a watershed moment, not only in EU-China relations, but obviously also in China. And that's important to recognize. Normal life, to some extent, is back on the streets in China. The economy is recovering. At the same time, behind the doors, we see a political rectification campaign being prepared for the upcoming months, which should make sure that Xi Jinping is certainly tightening his grip on power. We also know that China is planning and working towards its 14th five-year plan, which will again chart a new course for Chinese economic policymaking, and with ominous new terms being circulated about indeed dual circulation being the new mantra and framework. We don't know what that means, or at least we try to understand what that means, and we expect that it has far-reaching implications also for us. Let me just pull out one information bite from the past 24 hours. We have heard about a new guidance internally, but now also made public, for united front activities of the Chinese Communist Party in private companies in China. Again, we see new measures being rolled out by the day in China, and we think that the path forward for China, China's leadership and China's economy and political system is also quite contested and will be disruptive potentially. Now, EU-China relations, China itself, but also obviously the broader context is quite challenging. And it's important to look also beyond the US elections here and the daily news about US-China escalation. We think it's important to look at what's happening in countries like India and Australia, where we can get a taste of what potential relations with China will look like in the future. Against this background, we argue that the EU should be confidentially charting a new course on China. Let's be clear, this is not about a 180-degree change. It's also not one ship. In many cases, it's about remodeling our fleet. It's about giving a clearer sense of direction. And it's in support of that mission that we've assembled today in this hybrid conference setting. We have registered roughly 400 participants online. Currently, I don't have the number, but probably around 200 already here. And this creates logistical challenges. And I talk a bit about logistics now. A warning, you will see us running around here on the stage throughout this conference, giving signals to colleagues what needs to be done. So please be patient with us. We might face some challenges on the way. So thanks for doing this with us. Also for those colleagues here in the room, indeed use your face masks when you don't maintain the necessary distance. And we have a terrace here that you can use obviously also. And we just have to make sure that we maintain all of these relevant regulations here also in this room. Staying with logistics, you should be alerted that this webinar is recorded and streamed live. So obviously this is not Chatham House rule, but the workshops that we have scheduled for later, and I'll go through the agenda, these are Chatham House rule and will not be streamed live. There's one link for the webinar for our online guests here. This is the main room. And there's separate links for the workshop sessions. So you will stay in this room for most of the conference. When you want to go to the workshop sessions, which we'll announce later, you'll have to use a different link. And then you come back to this main hall, main room, where you have this main Zoom link that has been shared with you. So also you will have to move, not only colleagues here in this building. What matters as we chart this course forward? Obviously, there are urgent issues, and they go much beyond trade and investment. The Hong Kong situation is one that tackles, that is related to human rights, international rules-based order, and issues of trust. The Huawei 5G decision goes way beyond our traditional trade and investment relations. It's about tax sovereignty, security issues. The US elections and potential way forward in US-China relations is about our European geostrategic position. So one of the key takeaways really from that exercise today, but also the publication that we've prepared and that you can find online, is that we have to look at China much beyond trade and investment issues. And that's already happening. It's just a point that we wanted to support with our research here. What matters as we chart this course forward, we have to take into account wider European perspectives, and we have to deal with new stakeholders. And I think the best example really for that is the COVID implications of what has happened in China and how China has behaved internationally after that, and what that means for all of us. China is becoming day-to-day politics, not only for business and enterprises and politics, but really for just normal stakeholders, normal people like all of us. And you can see that over the past days. There's talk about a pork import boycott. We've agreed a geographic indications agreement between the EU and China, and Chancellor Merkel has celebrated it as a good day for German beer producers. You all know that we had issues with soccer in our German-China relationship in the past, where we tried to develop a joint soccer agenda. So again, it's meat, beer, and soccer. So I think it's obvious that China relations obviously touch at the very heart of German-China relations here. But jokes aside, if you look at the declared interests of the EU, greening, becoming more digital, and being geopolitical, there's a lot of China in all of these issues. And in navigating our interests and pursuing our interests, we argue that we have to have a compass that is built on principles and power. And we'll discuss this in detail today with you. And with that, I would like to run you briefly through the agenda. And I hope you all have that available at your desks at home or here in this room. In the first session, we will go live to Brussels. And I really thank Ambassador Klaus, the permanent representative for Germany in Brussels, that he joins us here, because there's better things that he could do, which, for instance, is to listen to the President of the European Commission, who's giving her State of the Union speech right now. He certainly has a good view from the ship bridge about what is happening and where we are heading under the German presidency in our China relationship. As many of you know, he brings a certain background, possibly also baggage, to his current role, as he was the former German ambassador to China. In the second session, we will need your input. We are going to make you work, because my colleague Silke Wettach, journalist at Wirtschaftswoche in Brussels, and we are going to ask you exactly the same questions that we've been asking ourselves as we've been working on these issues in the past. And in the third session, which we've labeled the machine room, there will be breakout groups with great inputs from colleagues at the Institute, but also inputs and comments by speakers who have been or are still in the machine room, where things actually are being decided. So how to put things into practice with regard to greater resilience. Sir Julian King was the former commissioner working on the security of the Union, and he has a very good overview, obviously, of these issues. On liberal competitiveness, we have Maria Martin Prat. She is, among many other things, currently quite busy because she's negotiating our comprehensive agreement on investment with the Chinese counterparts. On global influence, geopolitics, global public goods, we have Jasper Wieck, and he had also his hands on the new Asia-Pacific guidelines of the German Federal Foreign Office. So stakeholders, again, actors who have a very clear understanding of what is possible in practice and what we can actually achieve. Then there's going to be a lunch break, and after that we take a step back and reflect once more on these issues again all together in the main room with three high-impact navigators, thinkers, planners, preparators, Thomas Bagger, Manuel Lafont-Rapnouy, and Kim Jürgensen. I will introduce them later when we come to that session. In session 5, we'll have to broaden our horizons once more. We get live input from Washington and Beijing, two fantastic speakers, Ryan Haas and Jörg Wuttke, again moderated by Silke Wettach. Jörg Wuttke being the president of the European Chamber of Commerce, and Ryan Haas with a background in the National Security Council in the United States, but currently also preparing for a upcoming possible change in the US administration, obviously. Final session, and that will conclude hopefully a very productive day, will be an attempt to make sure that we understand the wider European perspective and also to dig a little bit deeper. We've discussed new stakeholders, and parliamentarians clearly are one of these groups that we have to take much more seriously. And we have a great group of parliamentarians assembled who deal with China matters across Europe. And the session will be moderated by our leading EU-China expert, Lucrezia Poggetti. With that, once more rules of the road here. During the breaks, please make sure that you put on your face mask when you go through these simple and well, very small halls here. But also, we have a bit of an issue with regard to Q&A sessions because we have to deal with online questions, chat questions, and questions here from the room. So again, I beg you for patience when we try to handle these situations. With that, I think we can move on to the first session. I would like to welcome Ambassador Michael Klaus, Permanent Representative of the Federal Republic of Germany in the European Union. And again, very grateful for his valuable time to support us here. And as I can't see you personally at this moment, I'll just speak into this room, but I would like to invite you to enlighten us. Where are we right now after this leaders meeting that has happened on Monday in our China relationship? What do we still have to expect going forward in the coming weeks and months? What are the main challenges for your work in Brussels to coordinate China policy? And what needs to be done? So Ambassador Klaus, the floor is yours for an input. We'll go move on to Q&A then with the audience. But first of all, let's listen to what you have to say. Warm welcome and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good morning to everybody from sunny Brussels. So, well, I would have liked to meet you all in person, but I think all of us have gotten used to that we do this via video conferences these days. And I'm afraid this will continue to be the case for quite some time. As you know, also the Leipzig summit that was originally planned for September 14, a physical meeting of the Chinese president Xi Jinping and the 27 European heads and of state had to be cancelled because of Corona, and instead we did have a video conference. And as far as I remember, it was the first time ever that heads of state and government did prepare a summit meeting in video conference themselves. 5 video conferences chaired by Chancellor Merkel and the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. So why was that? I think it was not only about preparing this video conference summit that took place 2 days ago, but it was also because leaders felt that it was important to clarify the EU relationship with China, and that has become a quite urgent issue. Why is that? Well, first of all, I mean, it has to do with China's rise, and that China has become much more important to us, both politically and economically. You know that China, by IMF standards, is the largest economy in the world, and it is also Germany's largest trading partner. I think the 4th or 5th consecutive year by now. And China has become an indispensable partner when it comes to advancing on the fight against the climate change and also solving international crises. And on the other hand, China, it seems, is moving away from us. Mikko Huotari has just mentioned the rectification campaign, and I think this shows a little bit that domestically China is becoming more repressive, and the process of reform and opening that has started more than 4 decades ago seems to be stalling, and some, like myself, believe it has even kicked into reverse. When it comes to international matters, so clearly we don't see that China tries to revolutionize the international order, but it is seeking a different international order. I would characterize it as a globalization, but with Chinese characteristics, which means it's going to be or should be more Sino-centric and more hierarchical. And I guess Belt and Road Project is a case in point. It's less rules-based, And I think also recently we have seen that China foreign policy and security policy, if you want to put it in very diplomatic terms, has become much more assertive. South China Sea, border clashes with India, Taiwan, and so on. When it comes to economy, it doesn't look like that China wants to become a real market economy, but that it would like to preserve the state capitalistic system that it does have now. And we see that for years now, the Communist Party is again taking on a stronger role in the economy. Just let me mention the example of party cells, which have become more important in the companies, be it Chinese state-owned companies, private companies, but also foreign companies. So it's not, as you would expect in a market economy, and as Adam Smith said, the invisible hand at work, but rather the very visible hand of the Communist Party. There's another reason why we have to define our future relationship with China. And that has to do with what some people call the new Cold War between the United States and China. It puts a lot of pressure on us in the European Union to decide where we do position ourselves in this triangle, because clearly we're not going to be aligning with one or the other side. It's rather we perceive this to be a triangle. How urgent this discussion is, we could see over debates we were having between European member states, Washington on the one side, European member states and Beijing on the other side on 5G. I think this is just a small taste of what is to come if trade conflicts and the hegemonical conflict between Beijing and Washington intensifies, if there is more of a decoupling, and the impact on supply chains and so on. So unlike the United States, we perceive China as a strategic competitor, but also as a strategic partner. And I think this, what has been coined 1.5 years ago as a little bit defining our relationship, reflects growing realism on the side of European member states, but it also shows that there is more of a convergence among member states on China. I guess this dilemma, strategic partner and at the same time strategic competitor, is no more visible than, for example, in the economic context, which is particularly relevant for the European Union, given that we are primarily an economic and not so much a political and military power. Notwithstanding that also here the Commission sees itself more and more as a geopolitical commission, and that also we try to make progress on a joint and common foreign and security policy. So on the one hand, as I said, China, the largest economy by IMF standards, Germany's most important trading partner. And at the same time, we see that the challenges are growing. Chinese technology is rapidly catching up, even overtaking us, I believe, in artificial intelligence. The biggest surprise to us Europeans was probably that an autocratic regime can be highly innovative. And for startups, I've seen myself in my time in China, conditions are better than in the United States or even in the European Union. And that shows us China is becoming more and more a real competitor also in the field of high tech and future technologies. This in combination with protectionism, which still continues to be a problem, and I'm sure Jörg Wuttke is going to elaborate on that later on. Forced technology, technology transfer, which unfortunately still is an issue. And also let me mention Made in China 2025, which also poses a state aid problem when it comes to fair competition between European and Chinese companies. So many here perceive all of this happening to be the biggest challenge to our economic and industrial base in decades. And when you discuss things matters here in Brussels, I think the general problem is that asymmetry that we see between state capitalism on the one side and market economy on the other side. So let me return now to the leaders' video conference. I mean, clearly, a lot of issues were under debate. Cooperation on climate, biodiversity was mentioned, but also human rights, events in Hong Kong, in the Xinjiang, South China Sea, and so on. But clearly, the focus for us is this year on concluding a comprehensive investment treaty, which would give us, the European side, more reciprocity, market access, equal treatment for European companies, and also a stop to forced technology transfer. I mean, not completely unexpected, not a lot of progress has been made in that video conference. Leaders obviously reconfirmed their willingness to conclude a CIT, a comprehensive investment treaty, by the end of this year. But there was not much more than that. So it was not very concrete and precise. And I guess here in Brussels, I can see also in the Council, there's not very high expectations that we will really have something like a CIT agreed by the end of this year. And this is why, in parallel, we have to adapt to the challenges posed by China, also to protect ourselves. So let me mention a few examples of what is under discussion. For the first time, I believe in decades, industrial policy has become quite important again here. So we say, well, the market doesn't cut it. We will have EU and member states come into support, like on car batteries, for example, or cloud computing, Gaia X, artificial intelligence, to mention but a few examples. Second, there's also a discussion going on to adapt our competition rules to the new challenges and to look beyond the EU internal market and to allow for European champions which are able to compete with the Chinese but also US giants. Thirdly, there is the issue of European companies that have to compete with highly subsidized state-owned enterprises. That is something that needs to be addressed and will be addressed here. So for us, this means there needs to be something like state aid control for Chinese companies, and there's a discussion going on how we can do this, for example, in reversing the burden of proof. And there's also the discussion of maybe providing state aid to European companies which compete with the Chinese SOEs globally. Furthermore, we are negotiating in the Council the so-called IPI. This is the international procurement instrument. It's about public procurement. And basically it says, if a country is open to us on public procurement, we will continue to be open. If that country is basically closed, it will also face problems, or their companies will face problems also when it comes to public procurement in the European market. And finally, let me also mention FDI screening, which also is a moving target. It's about also, in the end, protecting strategic high-tech technology in order to create also an environment where European companies can compete. This is a completely new direction that economic policies and thinking have taken here in Brussels. I've been seeing this the last 2 years since I came back from China. And if I may sum up, so our priority definitely would be to see that China opens up, that we have reciprocity, market access, and all these things. But if not, I think then we have to adapt and to move in a direction also where we need to protect ourselves. I think I would leave it there for the moment.
I hope you can hear me, and we'll try to deal with the signal feedback here. Thanks so much for this input. Very, very helpful to get us started with our discussions here. And just for clarifying once more, the proceedings in the coming minutes after I ask you a few questions, please feel free to put questions into the chat. That's our priority, questions here from the room. If possible, we'll try to bring in colleagues by actual live feed in Zoom, but we'll see whether that works smoothly. So put your questions in here. I see raised hands already, and we'll take them up in a minute. But before we get started, let me just be a bit straightforward, Ambassador, and ask you, are we on a track where you are confident that we are moving forward with our strategic partnership? Obviously, as a diplomat, you have to do what is necessary and required to get us there. But what's your vision when you wake up at night and think about China? Is it one that is more complementarity, that is more convergence, that is more alignment with European interest, or are we getting into rough waters and will the sailing be more difficult?
Habe ich doch eigentlich gerade gesagt. So. Well, do we move in the direction of a strategic partnership? So I think we are ready for this, but we do need to see results. Now, for 7 years, we have been negotiating on the CAT, and we didn't see much progress on the Chinese side. And so I think the signal that came from this video conference is this CAT and whether China is going to move on these issues. That also will be a little bit the proof to see whether China is also ready to do its bit so that we can move more towards a strategic partnership. I think there is less patience now on the European side because this has been going on for quite some time, that promises have been made, but at the negotiating table, this has not been matched by progress on those things which are really important to us. And that means more reciprocity and equal treatment.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can I ask you about the internal state of affairs? How difficult is it for you and other relevant colleagues in Brussels and across Europe to coordinate on these issues? if you compare just maybe 2-3 years ago and where we stand today, you mentioned the strategic outlook document from 1.5 years ago, which was a major step forward. But are we up to the task with regard to coordination on China policy, and what would be required to make a step forward on this?
Well, the EU has been in crisis mode for the last decade. And I remember at the European Council, I think it must have been in 2010, there was supposed to be a big China debate, and it was Chancellor Merkel already then pushing for it. And then because of recent developments, Euro crisis, it had to be postponed. And it really didn't happen until last week, when heads of state and government in 5 video conferences, as I said, chaired by the German Chancellor and the President of the European Council with her counterparts, the President of France and the Prime Ministers of member states. And so for the first time, they did coordinate, and for the first time, they discussed China strategy. That is going to be followed up at the next European Council, which will be by the end of next week. And that really does show that there is more of a coordination. And you can also see it in the preparatory bodies. That means the Foreign Affairs Council or the ambassador level COREPER, where we will have China also on the agenda again on Friday afternoon. That is something, an activity that we haven't seen since we did start with this a couple of months ago, really, to put this at the forefront. So I believe that we're up to the task. And I think it's very interesting. The take I get from these video conferences is that, I mean, we're not everybody on the same position, but there's a high degree of convergence that I had never seen before on China and our relationship with China.
Thank you. That's very helpful to understand. And I would like to make an experiment now and bring in first Robin Niblett and then Alicia Garcia Herrero for direct intervention here. So I will unmute you if you could do that same in your setting. So please first, Robin, the floor is yours if that works.
Hopefully, Mikko, you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Technology is working. Thank you very much for laying on this important conference.
If you could please briefly introduce yourself, Robin, for those of you colleagues, that we have 300 participants and not all of you probably of them know you. So
thank you, I will do. I'm Robin Niblett. I'm the director of Chatham House in London. Thank you, Ambassador, for those very fulsome remarks. One piece of it caught my attention, however. You said in this new US-China Cold War, where does the EU place itself? And you said, clearly, we're not aligning with one side or the other. Clearly, we see this as a triangle. I was wondering how that position squared with the fact that the EU does seem to be aligned with the US on its economic concerns, and you listed them very clearly, and it is aligned with the US on its opposition to the human rights abuses in China and the restrictions in places like Hong Kong. Can the EU really be unaligned in this triangle? Or is it simply because we have President Trump right now in the White House that allows the EU to take that position? Thank you for your answer to this question.
Ambassador, if you want to take this immediately.
Fine. Well, we're always in close contact, and myself personally with US colleagues. And I think when it comes to the economic issues and many others, we absolutely share the US analysis. But at the same time, I mean, we have to see what is happening now between the United States and Beijing is a hegemonical conflict. And this is not the categories of thinking in the European Union. So there's a difference. And then when it comes to taking measures, my feeling is that in the US, there's still this view that they can change China. And that's why they engaged and started to have a trade war, which is still continuing and which we don't know when it's going to end and where it will get to. This is definitely not the American approach. This is definitely not the European approach. So here we see, as I said, that China is a partner and at the same time a competitor. So we will first try to see that we find a solution to our differences. If not, We're going to take more measures, as I said, like industrial policy, which will probably happen anyways, but also that we talk about international procurement instrument, that we will talk about competition rules and FDI screening and these things. So that is a difference in the approach between the United States and us. That means we don't completely align with the United States, and at the same time, I mean, clearly as values and all of this is concerned, human rights, we're definitely not close to China, but very close to the United States, obviously. But that means it's more a triangle, and it's not something bipolarity.
Yes, thank you. And I think you've tackled also quite a few questions that we have here in the chat. So what would we be doing if China is not moving closer to our side? And maybe related to some of the things that you've just said, why did it take the European Union so long to align itself with the China hawks? Well, I would doubt that we've actually done this, as you've just said. But maybe the question really, what happens if China does not change? You've just tackled it. You said, well, we'll move forward with our autonomous measures. Right. But maybe once more, you could take this up. I'll combine it with one question from Noah Barkin, Ambassador Klaus. You see it also in the chat. How worried will China be about a transatlantic front developing against China if Joe Biden is elected? So maybe your outlook on that election and implications for EU-China policy as we move forward.
Well, I mean, clearly, I don't see ourselves in the camp of China hawks. I would say that I would phrase it rather, there is less naivete and more realism on the EU side. That is the way I would portray it. And then again, I mean, we will see in the next couple of months whether China is going to make a huge step towards us in addressing these issues of market access, lack of reciprocity, equal treatment for European companies, and the like. If not, we will increase discussion and pushing forward these issues and projects I just mentioned, like industrial policy, competition regulation, looking at into state aid, especially when it comes to SOEs, IPI, international procurement instrument, FDI screening, and the like. Now, on the issue of, well, how much is China afraid of a transatlantic united front against China? I think there is some concern. And when I was still in China, and I remember discussions I had with Chinese politicians, there clearly was that concern, and that is still there. So probably also with a view to that there might be a change in the American administration after November 3rd. I think there is a concern. And also the visits of Xi Jinping and Yang Jiechi that we have been seeing in the last couple of weeks here in Europe, we saw as kind of a charm offensive to prevent the Europeans from moving into the US camp. And also the Chinese interest in these leaders' meetings and video conferences, and also of having a physical meeting maybe next year, if COVID allows for, in Brussels, I think shows that there's a concern on the Chinese side, clearly.
Excellent. I have Alicia Garcia Herrero with a hand that has been raised earlier. Alicia, can you hear us? Do you want to come in here with your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I guess part of the question has been already alluded to. It's all about what can we do if China does not move towards a market economy. And I think by now we should be, frankly, quite close to the idea that it won't. I may be wrong, but that's my impression. And thus we really need to pinpoint a number of measures. We've heard a few. But, you know, it's also a question of prioritization and also of realizing what the consequences might be, and are we ready to take these consequences? So that's really my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. If I can bother you with taking up a few more questions, if that's okay. So that will be now trying to bring in a question here from the room, Andrew Small in the back, and I'll try to translate it to the system here. So if you could just ask your question.
do, given the resources that the EU can bring to bear in this area. But I've heard a lot of frustration from countries about the progress since then, from the Japanese, from the Indians, from the Australians. I wondered, again, I didn't hear it mentioned in your remarks. Now the budget has been kind of largely agreed. Do you think there'll be serious progress in this area during the German presidency, or do you think this is still going to kind of lag somewhat behind the hopes that people had in this area, which of course is partly intended as an alternative offer for countries to the Belt and Road as at least one of its intentions?
Thank you, Andrew. And I'll translate for the audience online because it was hard to hear that, and that's actually meant to be like that. So I apologize for that complex setup here. We don't have room microphones. The question is, what's the relevance and the way forward for the connectivity strategy? Because there is some disappointment by partners in terms of how fast we've been moving forward with that and what are possible next steps on that front. So I hope colleagues can hear that now, and that's exactly the mode how we will deal with questions in the room. So Ambassador, over to you.
Well, I think the first question was on, so what are we going to do if China doesn't change, especially in the economic field? And as I said, I mean, we are preparing for this scenario, so industrial policy, so that is something that I also expect the President of the Commission in her State of the Union speech to put forefront. That is something that has already begun. So also that we start to look at state aid when it comes to Chinese companies, be it that they are here active on the European market, or also when it comes to European companies which have to compete with the Chinese SOEs globally. So we are preparing also for that scenario, and how far we will go will depend on whether China will move closer to us on these issues and address our concerns or not. Then on this, well, as I said, before maybe, well, China is a strategic partner, it is a strategic competitor, but it is also, and the Commission President has been saying that very clearly, a systemic rival when it comes to human rights, when it comes to the international order, Hong Kong and these issues. And that is something also that has become more relevant, and that in our meetings and high-level meetings also with the Chinese side is now addressed on a regular basis, which was not the case a couple of years ago. And then as far as the connectivity strategy is concerned, well, I think it was a very modest start that happened here 2 years ago, and we really do need to work on this connectivity strategy. First of all, I mean, how can you label something connectivity strategy if it is also to be seen as something with this, globalization with, I would say, European characteristics? I guess we would need another notion. We would need an attractive narrative and a clear strategy. And it is the firm intention of the German presidency now also to bring this forward and to give this much more importance and visibility. I think we do have the means, the financial means in all of this. It just needs the political will to stress it and to turn this into something which is very visible and which is also something which is, well, maybe even at the level of Belt and Road.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I appreciate that you take up questions from the chat, obviously, and also that we are jumping around between topics. So that's thank you for doing that. I'll do this once more, and I'll bring in Jürgen Mattes from the Institute for Wirtschaft in Köln. And Jürgen, the floor is yours. Is that working?
Yeah, thanks very much, Ambassador. I would like to ask, or in the press conference on Monday, there was announced that there had been considerable progress with China on issues of level playing field, especially on subsidy transparency, on SOEs, and on IPR and technology transfer. Could you enlarge a bit on that and tell us what exactly is there on the table and how far this progress really goes? Thanks very much.
Shall I take this up directly?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, there has been some progress, but it has not been on the really decisive issues. I cannot go too much into detail because that is also something that is in this close negotiating circle between the European Union, and here the Commission is in the lead, and the Chinese side. But clearly, it is not seen as sufficient to go really for a deal. And it would need the real discussion that we did have also at the high-level meeting. The Chinese strategy is to say, okay, if we go for an agreement, we need to meet halfway. The European position is there is an asymmetry. That means China will have to move much further than does the European Union. And here, and it was at that level that things had been discussed at this high-level video conference. Here there was no progress. Everybody, also the Chinese side, insisted on its position. And if they continue and saying, you know, we need to meet halfway, then it's very clear that there's going to be no agreement and that there is not a will to really go for a CIT, which we will only conclude if there is serious progress. We don't just have a CIT for having a CIT.
Excellent. And I have a question here in the room, and then I will take up a question from the Q&A in a minute. So if you could please briefly introduce yourself for this room here, I'll try to translate it to the online setting. So back for your patience, those colleagues who are listening in from their computers. Thank you.
Accenture and Platform Industry 4.0. I have two questions. First, quick ones. First, you were hinting towards an openness of allowing for European champions to respond to the state subsidies of SOEs. Have sectors been identified? That's the first question. And then secondly, what is the thinking in Europe about digital sovereignty across the whole technology stack rather than only, if you will, cloud? You hinted towards Gaia-X.
Thank you. And that's again the challenge here. Thank you for your patience, Ambassador. Two questions from Svenja Falk here for you on issues related to digital sovereignty. The first question is, you mentioned the need for more coherent European approaches. So what are the sectors where industries have been identified to move forward for more joined up European approaches? And the second is, and I apologize for not getting that question across probably properly, but for digital sovereignty across sectors, how joined up are we, and how much of a priority is that for the the German-China EU Council presidency at this stage?
Okay, thank you for that question. So there is already more cooperation on car batteries, on cloud computing, and on artificial intelligence. And I guess it is a happy coincidence that at the next European Council, we'll not only be discussing our relationship to Beijing, but at the same time, we're going to have a discussion and we'll be taking also decisions on digital sovereignty. So that is going to be the second or third most important issue that we will be dealing with. And also, when now in a couple of minutes I have to return I have to go to the Coreper, this will be on the agenda. It will be Brexit, but it will also be digital sovereignty. And there is an ambitious decisions to be taken by heads of state and government next week.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I recognize the signal that you will have to leave the room in a few minutes. So maybe there's an opportunity for one more final question, if that is okay. And I would like to channel a question by Stuart Lau on the connectivity strategy once more, which you described as being too modest. So what can the EU do more specifically on third country infrastructure projects? And let me combine it again with taking up the question by Svenja Falk, and it's a technical question, but beyond cloud, what's necessary for us also to compete digitally vis-a-vis China? So we have Gaia-X, but what's the next? Is it hydrogen? Is it what areas are you looking at personally when you try to move forward this agenda in the meetings that you just mentioned. Thank you.
So when it comes to the digital, what we will be discussing is how to have also some sort of digital technological autonomy so that we will not be reliant on technology coming from outside Europe, how to promote this, and also how to turn the internal market also into a digital internal market. You know, we have 27 kind of digital markets, and we need to put this together. Then it will be a digital market of 450 consumers, which will be a very different position than it's just 82 million in Germany and 60-something million in France. So that is what it's going to be about, basically. And then on the connectivity strategy, yes, well, first of all, I think as I said, it does need a more attractive narrative, which I think will not be so difficult to find. And then obviously, I mean, the notion of connectivity strategy, it sounds like it's been invented by bureaucrats, which it obviously was. So also that would need to be changed, because we have something like this, it needs to have a visibility. And as far as money is concerned, you know that heads of state and government have decided 1.8 trillion euro that will be spent in the next 7 years. And there's going to be also a lot of money on programs and projects that could be related to One Belt, One Road. So I'm not so much concerned that there would be a lack of money. I think a lot could be done. And so we will also have internally to see how we better coordinate and have a joint strategy between the External Action Service and the Commission, and also different services inside the Commission. And I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to manage.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we have many more questions online, on YouTube, on Zoom, and in other settings. But I think we should conclude here at this stage by thanking you for your input and for your time. And obviously, we'll get back to you after the Council Presidency and then ask you how much you've achieved. And we thank you for your work in Brussels on all of these issues. And good luck and a lot of strength going forward. And thanks again for joining us at this virtual and hybrid setting. Have a good day.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and also a good day from Brussels to everybody.
Thank you.